Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Lab with Matt Carmen. I am Matt Carmen, your host and Chief Creative Officer here at Fermented Pixels, a digital agency in Dumbo, Brooklyn. Today's guest is Chad Pytel. He is the CEO and founder of Thoughtbot. Thoughtbot is another digital agency. They have locations in Texas, Boston, UK, New York, North Carolina, and San Francisco. And we really had a great conversation. In our conversation, we talked about the idea of failure leading to success, where the name Thoughtbot came from, benefits and challenges of having partners, the importance of having purpose in life, how to deal with COVID, benefits of a small and lean team, just the best differentiators that makes them stand out, how new technology will change the future, and of course, always advice for entrepreneurs and startups. And we just talked about some interesting projects he worked on, and we had a great chat. We also discussed they have a service which is basically it's a training service for startups and for agencies that need help with their business. And you can also find that at Thoughtbot/agency-U. That's Thoughtbot Agency-U, and check that out. It's pretty cool. Anyway, we had a great conversation. And without further ado, I now bring you Chad. Hello, Chad.
Hi.
Welcome to In the Lab, man. Thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm hanging in there. It's nice now that we're sort of in summer because it makes it easier to get outside and socially distance from people, but nice outside.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'll jump right in. I know your time is valuable. So tell me a little bit about your background and your history. How did you get into the creative field, and how'd you get to where you are today with Thoughtbot?
Yeah,
Great.
Thank you. I started doing web design and development in 1995. Full disclosure, I was in high school at the time, but 1995 was a great time to be getting involved in technology and the web because first of all, it was easy to learn everything about technology then because it was so minimal.
Yeah.
And most companies were creating their first websites at that time. So I got an opportunity even as a high school student to be involved in exciting stuff. And that's how I got started consulting. Started as freelancing and continued that through college and got a job got my first job at a startup out of college, but I graduated in 2002. And so, it was right after the dot-com bubble and it was right after the September 11th attacks. So me and a lot of my peers in school had a real trouble finding our first jobs. Yeah. And I was the first one in my cohort of friends to find a job at a startup, and I needed to build a team. So I hired a few people that I had worked with in school. And things at that startup unfortunately weren't what they seemed to be entirely. And so after about 6 months, it all fell apart. And again, I sort of fell back on that freelancing, but at this point I had a team of people that I had worked with throughout school and at the startup. We're all friends. They were the best men in my wedding. And so I said, if I could get some clients, would you want to keep on working together? And that's how Thoughtbot started. So technically I've been doing consulting since 1995. Thoughtbot started in 2003. So June of 2003. So we just celebrated our 17th year. And it's been a long, exciting ride full of ups and downs. Yeah.
I've been doing this for 20 years myself. Just a quick history. I've been in design 20 years. Obviously, it's hard to believe how young I look. I know that. But I only started this company about a year and a half ago. So I was a creative director for many years, for the last 10 years at various agencies. So actually owning your own business is completely different. So I highly respect you starting it out from the beginning like that. How'd you come up with the title Thoughtbot? Yeah, it's an excellent name.
Thanks. Me and the group of people that we started with, since we had been working and programming and designing things together beforehand, we always had this naming scheme on the software that we were writing. We would add bot to the end of everything that we did. So if we were writing a program that like managed customers, we would call it customer bot, or orders, we would call it order bot. And so when we sat around coming up with different name ideas, we were thinking thought. We loved the concept of brain, like and everything had bot on the end of it. So that's where we ended up with, was Thoughtbot. And the only downside is I really like the name, but turns out like when you tell it to people on the phone and that kind of thing, it can be hard for them to grasp what it is you're actually saying. That's the only downside.
Well, it's like that with a lot of agencies. I think the coolest agencies have the strangest names.
Yeah. For a while, people thought for a while, chatbots were really popular. So people think that we specialized in that. And nowadays, people think that we build robots. Yeah. So.
Which you will be doing very soon, I think.
Either that or the robots will be building. They're
going to take over the world.
Yeah.
So that basically, I guess you worked basically for yourself most of the time, right? I mean, like inspiring, and what inspired you to start your own agency? That was really just you basically came right out of the gate. Man. And
I think early on, I really like working with people to help them like take an idea that they have and use the skills that I have to like bring that idea to life.
Yeah.
And so I've been doing that since I got started. And so I really have, aside from that 6-month period, I've never had another and an internship in college. I've only been doing freelancing and consulting since then, and I think it's because I really like helping people bring those ideas that they have to life.
And being your own boss too. It's a beautiful thing. I'll tell you that. After about a year and a half now.
Yeah, I mean, I've probably gone so long without having a different boss that but the reality is though, the size we're at now, I do have a boss, and that's always the way that I thought about it, is the clients, but also the team that we have. I see myself as supporting them. And trying to create the company that we all want to work at.
Yeah, I mean that's a great thing to say. I really appreciate that. So you have partners, right? You're a co-founder. How many partners do you have? I'm sorry if I.
So we started with 5 equal partners back in 2003.
Okay.
But all of those other I outlasted all of them. Of the original co-founders, it's just me, but. 2 years in, we were joined by sort of our first employee, and his name's Matt, and he's still at Thoughtbot. So
a great name.
He's our COO. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. He's our COO. He's a developer as well, and in the COO position now. And I mean, I started with partners, but I think that and it was great. But the mistake that we made was we didn't understand. We were young, we were naive, we didn't understand how difficult it was going to be. And we did it out of necessity and out of that failed startup. Yeah. And if I had to do it over again, I would have had a more honest conversation with each other about why we were doing what we were doing, and what the contributions we were going to make and the roles we were going to make, and probably shouldn't have been that equal partnership in the beginning.
Yeah.
But I don't regret it, because I tend not to regret things. I tend not to because everything is the way that it was for a reason, and you just try to make the best choice at every stage.
It's a learning experience.
Yeah. So it's part of the advice that I have, but I don't regret it. And they're my friends.
So what are the advantages of having partners? I mean, obviously there are. I'm solo right now. I'm trying to get this thing going, but I was going to do it with a partner, and then that kind of fell through. It was a good thing that it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. But I do see the advantage of having partners, but what do you think are the biggest advantages of having partners, and any challenges that you see, and
Yeah.
how you guys resolve those challenges? Like with
I think
what are the best things?
aside from like the obvious one of like sharing the workload, it's really useful to have someone that you really, really trust and can confide in. So,
Yeah.
as a CEO, especially as you start to grow and start to build a team, it can be very alienating because you get in a situation where, despite the fact that you want to be honest and you want to be vulnerable and that kind of thing, and even if you are, you can get in a situation where you aren't completely free to be like, I have this wild idea and it means blowing up the whole company, and like you can't say that stuff to employees. It freaks people out. And so having someone who's a peer is really useful. That's probably the most useful thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I definitely can see you guys do things differently. I just came across your purpose page and like super impressed by that. I just love that idea. I mean, I think people in general need purpose,
Yeah.
lack of it. I'm not a religious person, but I mean, I do. Anyway, that's a whole other story. But I do think people need purpose, and I think that's beautiful that you kind of created that section of it. It was really inspiring to me.
Thanks. Yeah, we've historically like intentionally avoided having a mission statement or something like that because we really felt like that was corporate BS, like not meaningful. And so, okay. But we always but we're big on sharing how we work and what we believe and that kind of thing. And so we would often get questions about choices we were making, like, oh, that's different. Why did you make that choice? And we would always have an answer, but we didn't have anything that we could point to that like really like written down, explained our motivation, like why we do what we do, what our purpose was. And so we inherently knew what it was. And so it was actually really fun to write it down and articulate why we do what we do.
And it kind of came naturally. I mean, you could tell it by reading it that it was just like a fun thing to do, and that it came from the heart, which I really respect. So, yeah, that's pretty awesome. So, what were some of the challenges that you guys have had during COVID? I know it's been a little tough for us. And how did you deal with those, and what are some of the challenges?
Well, the biggest, most obvious one is the business impacts, because what we saw, like a lot of people saw, was basically our entire pipeline of new projects got put on hold. Like everyone just reacting to what was happening in their businesses and what was happening in the world. And it was like, we don't know if this is going to happen, or just going silent as they like reacted to like being forced to work from home and those kinds of things. And so that had a pretty significant initial impact on our revenue. We were really looking at, if this trend continues, if what we see happening in March continues, then our revenue could be down 30 to 40% in 2020. And so that was the first biggest challenge, was facing that prospect and figuring out what to do about it. And we made some changes, and which I'm happy to go into. And then, but through that, now the challenge is just, it's tough between COVID and now the, really sort of reckoning around racism in our country. It's an emotional, tough time for people to work and to be productive. So that's the biggest challenge right now.
And I think they interrelate in a lot of ways, because people are frustrated. Obviously, there's a lot. We try not to talk too much about politics, but there's obviously an interconnection between those two things. But I think things are going to start opening up again, and I try to stay positive about it. I think there's some beauty, even though the horror of what happened. I mean, just the idea that people all over the world, obviously, the riots were horrible, but for the most part, I think it was 99% of it was peaceful, and all around the world, people came out and just stood up against racism. It's beautiful,
Right.
So I think there's a lot to be hopeful for, and I think that we can. I think we'll see changes in the market. It's going to take a little time, but
yeah,
yeah, I feel
and
positive about it.
I do too. And at Thoughtbot, we've done a lot to reduce bias and make sure that we have equity at Thoughtbot. But
Excellent.
the difference for us is like, I realize that that's not enough. Like if we're focused only internally, then we're not using our full power to have an actual impact on the world.
Yeah.
And so we've been trying to find ways where we can, take action and have an impact outside of Thoughtbot. And we don't have all the answers.
Yeah, nobody does. We're all trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
I think it's very complex. I think today everyone's in their own tribe. I think I lie a little more in the center. Definitely a liberal, classical liberal. I think I'd call myself. But I think what's bad, I think, about today is that the conversation idea has died. And that, as soon as you start a conversation, automatically you might be this way, you might be that way. I think it's great that it's time to open up conversation with people and to just be able to talk to people that might not think the same way, not automatically assume that they're racist or they're race baiter or, whatever the side may be. So I do think there's a lot of hope for that. And I see that starting to happen. It's a little scary, obviously, with the administration we have right now, but we won't go too far. Again, I don't want to go too far into politics.
Well, I think, I take your point. I think there's a difference between politics and morality, though. And I think it's possible to have a conversation about racism and what that means in our country and have it be separate from politics.
I think so too. But we have to be honest about a lot of the statistics too. If that goes into a lot, anyway, that's all the issue. So we won't jump into that.
So what we did in terms of the pandemic, which I think was really important, is
that was the thing I wanted to get at.
If you looked at, we had to respond very quickly to the changing market. So Thoughtbot, traditionally, our go-to-market strategy, our value proposition was we have local studios in 6 cities, London and 5 cities in the US, New York, Boston, Raleigh, Durham, Austin, Texas, and San Francisco. And if you went to our website at the time, it said things like local studios working closely in person with local customers. That just wasn't going to fly. And at a time when our business is shrinking, people coming to our website, seeing that language, that was just unacceptable, and we needed to very quickly pivot to make sure that when customers came to our website, they weren't instantly saying, well, I guess this isn't the company for me to work with right now. And so
but how would they come to that conclusion?
Because if our website is covered in we're going to work in person with you.
Oh,
then it's just not gonna work. And so I'm really proud of what we did, which was we did exactly what we do as designers, which is okay, that was the solution. What was the underlying problem or value proposition that we were saying when we said we worked in person with people? And it was that we are the most collaborative company. We work really collaboratively with our clients.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that our clients say that makes us different is that we teach them how to be a better company and how to build better products. And so we pulled that out of there. So now if you visit our website, it says working collaboratively with you, no matter where you are, and pivoting to that different value proposition, removing the language that we had around working in person. And I think we did that very quickly, very early on. And I think it's one of we'll never really know, but I think it's one of the reasons why we were able to very quickly correct the decreases the trend line that we saw on the new business.
Oh, well, that's really insightful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. No, seriously, I appreciate that. So those are those things that you think you'll keep, or changes that are just during COVID, or there are things that you've learned during COVID that are like now they're going to stay with you guys forever, or is it just, those things you mentioned? I think they seem to be things that will stick around, right? There are more changes internally in the way that your thought process works, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're reluctant to make like grand declarations about what the future of work looks like, just because it's such a tenuous situation and such a unique situation that I think you can sort of like over index and be like, oh, the way that it is now is the way it's always going to be. Yeah. And it's going to be this fundamental shift.
Mm-hmm.
But we also recognize that like people need certainty. They had questions. We had some people who live in New York City and London and Boston, and they're saying like, I'm not sure that I want to live in the city, or like, I want to be closer to family or whatever, and asking whether they can move. And we needed to have an answer for those people that wasn't just, no, you can't move.
Yep.
And so what we've said is that for all current employees, we're fully supporting remote working going forward. Mm-hmm. So if you need to move, that's okay, either permanently or temporarily or that kind of thing, and we're going to make it work. A big factor of our previous working in person model was clients. We work very closely with clients. Yeah. So the fact that all clients have also been forced to go remote meant that all of we weren't getting objections like we would normally get from clients. So it'll be interesting to see 6 months, a year from now, when if people are fully back, if our clients are fully back in office, whether we'll get the same objections.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm definitely a big believer in the in-person thing. I still think that matters a lot, but I do think that this whole COVID thing has made us realize that we don't necessarily have to. You know what I mean? It's which is a beautiful thing for a lot of reasons, like just like a doctor appointment. Like you don't have to take off a half a day. Like people are realizing that there are certain things that are just silly. That you don't have to meet people with. I mean, there's always going to be that value in that face-to-face, actually being in the same space. But I think that's been a change that will stick with us. You know what I mean? Like people realize that we can do this remotely, and it's not going to really affect the quality of things.
Yeah.
But I'll always be, I still love that in person. But I think there's something about it that you can't manufacture yet online. I mean, maybe we'll get to that point where we have.
I think the thing that we need to worry about is, I don't think a hybrid model works. I don't think trying to do a design sprint with half the team in person and half the team remote works. The reason why it's working now is because everyone is remote, and so everyone's equal and that kind of thing. I think so. You start mixing it, and what we've seen in the past is it becomes really difficult, and the people who are remote become like secondary to what's going on in the room and that kind of thing.
Oh, that's really interesting. Actually, you mentioned that because I never thought of that. I guess it's just because it's a different dynamic, right? So everyone's on a different page, and it's kind of weird. It's like I just walked over to the other guy's desk and I said something, and now I gotta. So either everyone's on the same page or they're not. That does make sense. That's interesting. So it seems you guys have a kind of a lean, mean team. I mean, you guys, obviously you have like the idea of a small studio. What would you say the benefits of working with a small studio as opposed to like the big firms? We're a small studio as well. What would you, as a selling point, but also just intellectually, like, what do you think of the benefits of just working with a more lean team?
Well, the primary benefit is actually a selfish one, which is I don't want to be part of a big team. I want to work really closely and know the people that I work with really well and feel like we've got each other's back and that we're all in it together. And I think that that's really hard to do on a very large team.
Agreed. Yeah.
So, you know, that actually is primarily the thing that's driven it, not necessarily like client benefits. But there obviously are project benefits. I mean, our typical team size working on a project going from concept to launch of a new digital product is 3 people, a designer and 2 developers, or 2 designers and a developer working directly with a client.
Yeah.
And bigger than that, and you have so many potential lines of communication that need to happen. It's hard to do things. So everything we do, we scope projects to launch the first version in under 12 weeks. That's really hard to do with a larger team.
Yeah.
So that's the big one. And, you know, we're bigger now. We've grown to the 6 studios. We're over 100 people, but each studio is that small. What we've tried to do is say, we want to reach more people. We believe we have something good. Let's bring that not only to clients, but I get emails from people being like, I want to work at Thoughtbot and I live in this place, right? So designers and developers. So figuring out how to bring Thoughtbot to more people while maintaining what has always made Thoughtbot teams great. And the trick was growing geographically, growing small studios and bound together by that common purpose.
So you can have more of that local attention, right, to people without having to, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So it's nice because what we're doing now is you get a small group of people who really know each other well and work together well and understand it, but now they're also part of something bigger, and that's also nice. I don't think everything is perfect with Thoughtbot, but that's actually one of the things that's working well, is that we're striking a good balance there.
I mean, in honesty, I think no firm is perfect. It's really all about the journey. I mean, that sounds corny, but it really is. But it is fucking true. You know what I mean? Like, it is really about learning what works best for you and what works best for the client. Mm-hmm. And I do like your model. I do respect it. I think it's something that again, I'm learning. It's kind of why I wanted to do this whole podcast, and just to learn and also just gain relationships and make friends with people in the industry. So that's the main thing. So the agency business is so competitive. Obviously, I look at your pages and the way you guys have done your case studies. I found that really, really interesting. The way you really go into that. I've seen other companies do that. What would you say is your biggest differentiator that separates you from other agencies?
Yeah, particularly on the development side, but it's not just a development thing, but in the development world, there's this trope or this tendency to want to get a client and then work with them forever and make them dependent on you. And that's not at all the model that we have. Our goal is to make successful businesses. Mm-hmm. And so what we do is go from concept to launch or work with an existing product team. And our goal is to make them so good that they don't need to work with us anymore. And that is very different than a lot of other companies.
That's very noble. Yeah.
Yeah. So a big part of working with people is we don't do much formal training. We're big believers in learning by doing, but a lot of working collaborate. And that includes pairing or we work with a lot of founders who have never created a digital product before. Yeah. For example, we purposely don't have a product manager or a project manager on those kinds of projects, because what we found or are afraid of is if we put a project manager on that, you have a CEO creating the product. They've got the vision. You've got the design and development team. If we put a project manager on that project, that CEO, that product, they're never going to learn how to effectively manage that product. They're not going to be close enough to it, and they're never going to be forced to do it. So we remove that role so that we the designers and developers meet the client and help them learn how to effectively manage a product and say no, and like prioritize and do all those things that are going to be really important to having a successful product and a successful business later on.
Well, that's really insightful, because I guess it's like, it eliminates the telephone game, really.
Right.
So you just
Right.
have more like straight direct to the person who's working on your project, instead of going through the project management, which
Right.
I have seen throughout my career can be problems. That's
Right.
Yeah, that's
Right.
pretty cool. Definitely something to think about. So this is a big one, obviously. This is something that we could talk about forever. But how do you see new technologies changing the way people interact with the world and just the internet in the future? Like, what do you see? Like, if you had a time machine, what do you think is going to be? Obviously, we're going to have large amounts of automation. I think that Andrew Yang is very correct in his theory of what's going to happen. But just in general, what's your just throw out?
Well, one thing I see relatively short term, and I think it's really concrete, is we were very early with mobile, and so obviously mobile has been a big trend.
Sure.
But one thing a lot of people don't realize that happened with mobile is that traditionally companies creating software, they made really crappy designs and software, and it was okay because it was like business software.
Yeah.
And then what happened is everyone got an iOS and an Android device in their pocket that had a level of design and functionality that was like so much better than what they were used to.
Yeah.
And so everyone's standards went up.
Yep.
And it's like no longer acceptable to create, well, it's still acceptable in some circles to create poorly designed.
I know. I've worked in this sphere stuff.
Right.
But
but it's increasingly important, and even for internal tools, that there's a level of thought and design that goes into the user experience of what you're putting in front of your employees and your team members and your customers. And so, it's not a super long-term trend. It's not even earth-shattering, but I believe it's really important.
So I didn't put this in the question, but how do we think we can communicate that better with clients? Because I think a lot of people don't realize I think a lot of people, I mean, other than like large companies, a lot of people don't understand the value of design and the value of user experience, and it's obviously like literally the most important thing to me anyway. Obviously technology, it has to work correctly, but I mean, it's so important, right? The user experience, like how do you communicate that? I'm throwing this out there.
Yeah, no, I'll be perfectly honest, I don't have the solution. It's something that we struggle with. I think that there's a possibility that we shouldn't be explaining it. So like, we need to put it in terms that either customers will understand or stop talking about it and just do it. And the results speak for themselves in that regard. And if that means that customers don't value design when we say design because they don't know what that means, then we've got to figure out and if we just go, it's building, or it's creating, or whatever it is, and it's just part of the process. Design is part of the process of creating. Then, that's sort of what I'm gravitating towards, just because I'm tired of having the conversation or the argument and people not valuing it.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult one, believe me. I know.
Yeah.
So just on it, I mean, generally this is we want to talk to a lot of agencies, but we talk to clients on this one. It's basically more of an entrepreneurial kind of business sense. So what advice would you just give generally to an entrepreneur starting a business? And then we'll get a little more specific after that, but just generally, what do you think you would?
The most important piece of advice that I have, and it's in part because not only is it super important, but it's also something that people really fail to do, surprisingly, because it seems so straightforward when you say it, but it's talking to customers. so many people
Don't
who
have
are starting something new never actually talk to the people who will use their product. And I think the reason why is because they're scared of learning that their idea is not going to work.
As humility is the biggest thing, right? Right. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. You have to learn how to realize that your idea sucks, and you have to have the ability to know that you want to get to the goal where, you know what I mean? I think a lot of people are like, oh, here's an idea I have, and this is going to be great, and they're not willing to let go, and you have to be willing to let go, because at the end of the day, I mean, it really matters. Like, I mean, they make the decisions, right? I mean, that's why, I've read tons of stories on even like there's tons of them, but Instagram, when they first started, they had no idea that photos were going to be the biggest thing. So they kept releasing like new versions of it, and it turned out everyone just loved the photo and the filters. So then they focused just on that. So it was all about just the agile phase of just repeat, test, see what people actually want instead of thinking what you want. Be humble about it, and let people decide what they want, because they'll let you know, and test with the right demographic. So that's great.
So many people, founders, people with ideas, they either don't talk to anyone, or one step is, oh, I talk to my friends and family and they love the idea. Well, of course, they're your friends and their family. They're not going to tell you that your idea is terrible. But even if they would be totally honest with you, they're probably not your actual customers, and so they don't actually know. They're giving you their opinion rather than their experience.
And that's why
the only way to do it is to really talk to people who are really,
Totally agree. I've worked with agencies where I won't name names, but places that'll just take the money. They'll just be like, we all know it's a bad idea, but it's like, we'll take the idea. And I'm trying not to be that kind of company. I want to be honest with the client. Like if I think it's a bad idea, I'm going to tell. Or if I think they haven't fully thought it out, I think it's really important. And I see that in you guys too. That's why I wanted to speak with you. So
it's a really important point, but I'll tell you something that I've learned over the years is that just telling someone that their idea isn't going to work doesn't accomplish what you want, because they're just going to go to another company.
And you might be wrong too.
Well, you might be wrong, but a founder who's passionate about their idea, telling them that it's not going to work, they're just going to shop it around until they find someone who takes their money. And so
I know
we've actually responded to that, to change our process, to figure out they're going to work with somebody who's going to take a bunch of money. They're going to. So what is the smallest thing we could do to get them to the point where we can put a prototype in front of some real customers so that they can learn for themselves that it's not going to work. That's the product design sprint. That's the 1 week or less process of rapid prototyping and putting that prototype in front of real people. And there's no substitute for that. And we've worked with a lot of people who we do that with, and they say they learn that they need to adjust or they need to abandon their idea, and they've done it for far less money than they would have working with someone who's just like, we'll build that.
Of course. How do you communicate that to them? So that must be hard, though. I know this is off the charts here, but just like, how do you, like, it's really tough to communicate that with a client. How do you do that? So you go through like a discovery phase and a prototyping phase, and you explain to them, it's got to be a tough way, a tough thing to do. So
it's actually not tough, because you make them part of the process. So you're not telling them anything. They're seeing it for themselves, because they helped create the prototype. They helped conduct or watched the tests.
Before they even sign a contract, before you even.
How do we communicate that?
Before, instead, we have to do this discovery phase. When they're ready, they're just like, all right, we got offers to do this for $75K, and that it can't be done properly without 150. You just know it in your heart. And how do you explain to them, that we have to go through this discovery phase? It's so important. How do you guys kind of communicate that? Or Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
similarly,
no, it's tough.
the goal is to, in the sales process, consult with them so that they discover it themselves rather than telling them.
Yep.
And so one of the things that we do is we do scoping and design exercises in the sales process. So
Nice.
we'll bring up a virtual whiteboard and we'll do sorting of their features and plotting. We'll do design jam, which is a 1 hour rapid brainstorming session, and taking someone through that that's going to be a good client and good to work with. They're
Yeah.
going to discover on their own the things that they don't know,
Yeah.
or that they're making assumptions about, or that, oh, this is a big risk area.
Yeah.
And when they discover it on their own, they're going to want your help solving it.
And this is prior to signing contracts, obviously.
It is, yeah. It's
So
just, an hour or two of working together, working through those.
So just kind of assuming that they have the budget, I guess, or you ask first, or just.
Yeah. So that you want to be talking about estimates and money as early as possible.
Yes.
But you're right. You don't want to scare people. If they've talked to a bunch of other people and they're at 75K, and then you have a first conversation and you say, oh, on average it's 150K. Well, then they're out the door, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to figure out a way to reframe what you're talking about in terms of the value that you're going to provide.
Yeah.
So the way that we do that at Thoughtbot is we talk about time to market. So and the value of discovering that you're on the wrong track early. So if you're going to work with another company and you're going to spend 75K over 3 months and launch something and find out that that you built the wrong thing, isn't it worth investing a week to before and 10K to avoid that? And we're the company that can help you do that.
Wow, that's very insightful. So like I said, we're learning this, and that's the kind of company we want to be. We want to be, we don't want to be just like a web design company. We want to be kind of like a Thoughtbot, or, obviously like even the bigger company, a Rokon, or whatever you can take it to. But I mean, the idea of like that kind of thought process and being able to communicate to the client like that. So that's very insightful. I appreciate that. So last question, I know your time is valuable. What is one of the most challenging and rewarding jobs you've worked on? Obviously, it doesn't have to be your favorite, so you don't insult anybody.
Yeah.
Just name a client, not a client, but a project that was like the most challenging and the most rewarding at the same time. And what were the challenges and the solutions like?
Yeah. So
that's a big one. So take
it's okay. So at this point, I've helped bring literally hundreds of new products to market.
Yeah.
And when a project is challenging because you're working with a challenging client, that's not fun. When a product is challenging because it's hard to make the product simple, it's hard to create something that people love because it's special, that's what is enjoyable. And when you have a client that you're working with, that you're truly collaborating with to solve that problem, those are the most fulfilling projects. And so those projects where
anything specific, or if you don't want to talk.
So we work with I mean, it's okay. An example, oftentimes when you meet a client who has a very strong business need that is driving something. So we're working with a client now and I'm working personally with them. They're a restaurant company. They have over 100 stores.
Okay.
And they're completely shut down from COVID. People are not allowed to go in the store. Everything has to be delivery.
Yeah.
And they never did delivery by themselves. They do, Uber Eats and that kind of thing deliver for them. And so they look at that situation and they care about customer experience and the relationship they have with their customers. And now it's entirely being handled and outsourced to third parties. And that's not an acceptable situation for us. So them coming, they were an existing client, great to work with, super collaborative, really smart. And they come to us and say, we've got this problem and it's very urgent for us to solve it. How would you approach it, and what will you do to help us launch delivery services ourselves? And that's the kind of challenge, and that like makes me super excited. And figuring out how to launch, they mobilize over 1,800 drivers across their 100 stores in a matter of weeks.
That's
what
awesome.
can we build that's going to be able to do a delivery app for drivers, customer, mobile experience, and an entire admin backend for doing that, designing, building, and launching that system. That's the kind of thing that makes me super excited. And that's the kind of challenging product that I like.
Yeah, no, that sounds really awesome. So you guys built a web application and also native mobile apps all together to communicate with each other?
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this was a great conversation, man. I have to say, very insightful. Love talking to you.
Well, thanks for having me. I could talk about this stuff for all day. In fact,
I could talk about it too all day. If you have anything you want to ask or you want to talk about, please jump in. And you guys are available at thoughtbot.com. If you want to plug some things, or if you just want to bring up some subjects, I'm not busy right now. So
the big thing that I want to share is, just like I started Thoughtbot because I like helping people, and my skill set is design and development. So helping people do that. A couple of weeks ago, our chief marketing officer, Lindsay, was basically like, you have another talent, another skill set, another area of experience where you can help people. And as I put it, was like navigating and running great agencies.
Yeah.
And so we've launched something called Agency U, which is a group. It's at thoughtbot.com/agency-u, the letter U. And it's a small group of agency founders and managers who are getting together, doing one-on-one coaching with me, goal setting, and group meetings on a monthly basis. So, it's a paid program, but I'm really enjoying it. Just started, and I'm really enjoying working with people, having not only calls like this, but one level deeper, where we're digging into how your agency actually works. And I'm sharing my experience about how you can navigate this difficult time, or how you can grow, how you can manage the team better, and how you can get better clients. So.
Well, that sounds like something I might take advantage of. So, well, I really thank you for your time. I'm going to pause the video, and we'll just say goodbye after we pause. But just give you a cheers. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you.
And pause the video now. And I thank you for your time, Chad.
Mm-hmm.